What if I told you that you're hungry a lot less often than you think you are? As we grow up and we get bigger and stronger, we become able to tolerate more and more stress. We begin to have higher performance and higher thresholds of functionality. Your initial gym intimidation is replaced with a drive to lift heavier. Your initial worry at work is replaced with a fire to earn a promotion. And your appetite, well, that gets bigger too. Or does it? As I recover from burnout, I've figured out some pretty interesting things about how our stress response works and how it affects our hunger signaling. So today, I'm going to teach you why you might not really be hungry when you think you are. You might just be nauseous, and how you can stay satiated even though that's the case. So we all know what hunger feels like, right? And we know what nausea feels like. But now I want you to think back to a time when you've been so extraordinarily hungry that you felt nauseous. Maybe you had just run a marathon. Maybe you had just lifted weights. Or maybe you were just overstimulated. But the next time that you ran a marathon, you probably didn't get as nauseous. Or the next time you lifted weights, you probably didn't get as nauseous. But what you did get was hungry. See, initially when we do extremely difficult tasks, we get nauseated because the stress response is so robust. But as we do things more frequently, we get less and less of a response from our stress hormones, which is why it starts to feel easier. But we still get a little bit of nausea, and then we perceive that as hunger. See, most of us today aren't running marathons, but almost all of us are consistently stressed and overstimulated. And you might not think that your favorite Disney movie is stressing you out, but it certainly is stressing out your nervous system. The only difference is you've watched so many movies that the stress response isn't robust enough for you to get nauseated. You just feel hungry. That hunger you're experiencing isn't real hunger, but it is high cortisol. And we know that when we have high cortisol, we're not going to make the best decisions with food, and just powering through is only going to deplete willpower, lead to mental burnout, and make us want to binge eat. In our modern world, most of us are walking around with perpetually high cortisol, and it becomes that much harder to control our appetite. So if we're always nauseous, we can do one of two things. So number one, we can take away the nausea. Now that's pretty unrealistic because that would mean you would have to avoid exerting yourself, trying new things, even driving your car possibly. And that's just not going to work. But option number two is to eat like you're nauseous and therefore feel satiated. And this is what I recommend. So what's a food plan that's good for nausea? A food plan that's good for nausea is one that's high in simple carbohydrates, high in lean proteins, moderate in fat, and low in fiber with a high sodium content. Liquid fats are considered better than solid fats here. White rice and white pasta are favored over your whole grain varieties, and it's best to avoid fried foods, full-fat dairy, and spicy foods. For protein, we want to prioritize our lean proteins like chicken, turkey, non-fat Greek yogurt or low-fat, and nuts. For fruits and veggies, we're going to look for mashed potatoes, mashed sweet potatoes, pears, or applesauce. Now obviously, we're not just going to eat a bunch of bland chicken and white rice all the time. Nobody wants to do that, and that's not a diet anyone can stick to. I also don't recommend just pounding a bunch of simple carbohydrates because there's no satiety in that, and that's definitely not going to get you to your physique goals or make you feel your best. And there are certain inflammatory foods here that I recommend avoiding, such as dairy and nuts. So how are we going to incorporate these principles into a non-inflammatory diet that we can stick to? First, let's talk about protein. I suggest loading up on protein. Protein is going to keep you satiated and keep your blood sugar stable. I don't recommend that you get fatty cuts of meat because again, that's going to exacerbate your nausea. What I do recommend is getting lean cuts of your ground meats in particular, such as some very lean ground turkey or very lean ground chicken breast. Lean cuts of beef can also be okay, but I would recommend that you experiment and see how it affects your satiety. Now let's talk about fats. Protein on its own is great for stimulating satiety, but it is quite insulinogenic. But what we can do is add fats to our protein to slow that blood glucose spike and keep ourselves satiated for even longer. Now here, what do I recommend? I recommend adding healthy fats to your lean meats rather than getting the fatty meats. So what I recommend here is taking your lean ground chicken breast or your lean ground turkey and adding some healthy fats to it as you cook. Now this should be in the form of healthy oils, and preferably those with a high smoke point, such as avocado oil, coconut oil, or some ghee. Coconut oil can be a bit hit or miss for some people because of the MCTs in it, creating some digestive upset, but if you're able to tolerate it, it is great for satiety. I personally love olive oil, but I don't cook with it because of the low smoke point. So one of my favorite things to do is bake or broil my lean meat and then drizzle my olive oil on top for a healthy, satiating, and satisfying meal. For carbs, I recommend focusing on white rice and mashed potatoes. Applesauce and pears can work great, but I recommend keeping these as snacks as I find that they don't digest well when paired with meat. I also recommend keeping your carb portions in general moderate. Carbs are great, we love carbs, but it's very hard to get satiated on pure carbs. But what I would do is keep your carb portions moderate, and again here we want to add some healthy fats to lower the glucose spike. So for example, cook your rice and at the end drizzle some olive oil on top. Or make your mashed potatoes and have some butter in it. Again, don't go crazy, a little goes a long way. We want to remember that we're using fats for satiety and blood sugar control while prioritizing our lean proteins and still getting in enough carbs. For vegetables, I think these can be minimized. Fiber has its advantages, but only in a couple of places. So I would say when you have fiber, to prioritize vegetables that are actually low in fiber and to cook them well just so that they add bulk to your meals. Fiber is best utilized when you're craving a larger meal and can scale back on the carbohydrates. Or alternatively, fiber can be beneficial when you're going to be remaining sedentary for long periods of time. If you have to prioritize fiber, I do recommend leaving it for later in the day once you've completed the most stressful activities of your day, because fiber taxes your digestion and will weigh you down. Now, under no circumstance would I recommend uncooked raw vegetables, as these can be very tough on your digestive system and the nutrients don't absorb properly. Finally, I suggest salting your meals well. While water is great for staying hydrated, it can only do its job when there's enough salt in the body. Water alone draws out salt, potassium, and other minerals that we need, whereas in the presence of salt, it will draw water into your cells and help you stay hydrated. For salt choices, I suggest either Himalayan pink salt or Redmond's real salt, which is a low microplastic sea salt. You might be saying, hey, this sounds like a weight loss diet, with all the emphasis on lean proteins and healthy fats. Where's all the fun stuff? Well, the reason that weight loss diets are structured this way is because when you decrease calories, cortisol naturally increases. And so the best way to combat an increase in cortisol or an increase in nausea is to eat like you're nauseous. So now we know what to eat and we know how to eat it. But when should we apply these principles? Surely we can't be expected to eat this way all the time, right? I want my fatty foods. I want my donuts. I want my spicy Takis, right? I personally think it's a great idea to eat like this on a regular basis, given how we're constantly stressed and most of us have sedentary lifestyles. But the most important time that you can use this information is when you think you're about to go off the rails with your diet and just go crazy. Maybe you didn't get to eat lunch, so now you're starving. Or maybe it's just been a day full of really new experiences, you've had a ton of dopamine highs, and now you're looking for a food that's just going to make you feel that dopamine high again. These are the times that I think you should have these foods. It might sound counterintuitive, but you should have these bland, relatively simple meals available to you when you're craving junk food the most. Have this stuff and then have your junk food. You're probably going to be so satiated off of the meal that you just ate, you might not even crave the junk food anymore. Or if you do, then your insulin is going to be way more controlled, your blood sugar is going to be way more stable, and you're going to be able to stop yourself at 1 Snickers bar instead of 10. It's also going to help with cravings afterwards, because by levelizing your blood sugar, you're not going to feel like you got this crazy sugar high. You're going to feel like you had a dessert and you're satiated and you feel ready to go for the next day. I also suggest having these foods prepared ahead of time, because when we're extraordinarily hungry, preparing food can seem like an incredibly demanding task. Even Healthline on their website says that when you're nauseous, you should avoid the preparation of food. And we've all experienced this, where something smells good in the kitchen and you start to get hungry. I'll leave a link to the article from Healthline in the description in case you want to learn more about eating when nauseous. But by having a running stock of these healthy, bland, simple meals available to you, you're always going to be prepared for those moments when you're either too lazy, too stressed, or too hungry. The important thing to remember with diet tips like this is that we're not restricting our diet, we're just adding to it. We haven't said don't eat your cake, we've just said eat your lean protein first. Initially, this might be hard, but as you do this more often, it's going to become a habit, and you might even find yourself craving lean meats, healthy fats, and simple carbohydrates. And remember, small steps are key. Don't try to make this your entire diet on day one, but rather remember that this tip is there to help you in the tough times. And at the end of the day, you can always make room for dessert. Comment down below. Is there anything else you'd like me to discuss? Are there any questions that you have about when and how to use these foods? Or have you been eating like this already? And if so, what has your experience been? And if you enjoyed me and my content, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the bell button so you can stay up to date when I post new content and follow me on my journey as I recover from burnout. So good luck taming your nausea, and I'll see you in the next video.